Hi there, my name's Caitlin Bandy, and this is my channel, Bandy's Books. Today I am here with the book tag, which was originally created by Brandon's Bookshelf about a week ago. And this tag is inspired by the different portions of the body. So different body parts are equated to different themes in terms of our books. I really like the different themes that were picked for this, and I've come up with a pretty diverse stack of books for each of the prompts, I think. So let's just go ahead and jump into it. Prompt number 1 is the brain, and the brain correlates to intellect in this prompt. And the book that I read recently that to me felt very intellectual was 266 by Roberto Bolaño. This book is originally published in Spanish, and I did read it in its original Spanish, which for me was a feat in and of itself. I've read series and books and stuff in Spanish before, a lot of Gabriel Garcia Marquez's work, a lot of Carlos Ruiz Zafón, Julio Cortázar, but this for me was the biggest undertaking that I have attempted so far in Spanish. It's 1,100 pages long. It's broken into 5 separate little individual books that basically correlate to each other. They kind of circle back. Basically, book 1 starts you at a place, and by the time you get to book 5, it kind of links you back to book 1, but kind of in vague, obscure ways. And there is a lot of highbrow stuff in here. There are a lot of references to literature, current day politics, history, femicide. Like there's a ton of topics. There's commentary on literary critics and the publishing process. Like it goes in a lot of different directions. And so for me, this was probably not only just because it was reading this in my second language, but also just in general, I felt like this was a very weighty, heavy, intellectual book. So I was proud of myself for finishing it, period, but second of all, for finishing it in my secondary language. That was for me a pretty big accomplishment and made me feel very intellectual. Prompt 2 is the mouth, and that is correlated with the voice. I picked something that was a little bit literal, I think, in this particular instance, and that is The Girl with the Louding Voice by Abi Dare. I did not pick this just because it has the word voice in it. I picked this because this whole book is about somebody learning to speak up for themselves and to find their identity, their truth, who they are as an individual. And the theme of speech and voice and ability to communicate runs really heavily through this book. This is an excellent book about the lengths that someone goes through to receive an education and to pursue literacy. And it's phenomenally written and really moving. It is difficult to read at times, but really well worth it. Prompt number 3 is the heart, which was equated to feeling. So of course there are so many books that I could pick for this prompt. I've had so many books that have made me feel just a plethora of things. So this could be never ending. I decided to focus in on one book that I read earlier this year that has really stuck with me, and that's Beasts of a Little Land by Joo-hae Kim. This is a book set in Korea, and it follows a couple characters within a brothel and their survival throughout the horrors that occur to them. This is an incredibly moving book. It includes a little bit of historical fiction, and it really dives deep into how people survive atrocities, how people survive war, how people survive poverty, and the repercussions of that survival. It was a fantastically written book. If you haven't read this one, definitely should. Prompt 4 is the arm or strength. I found that interesting that the arm got correlated with strength. I guess because we're, flexing the gun show. So I picked Olga Dies Dreaming by Xochitl Gonzalez for this prompt. I think that Olga and her brother Prieto both exemplify strength in different ways throughout this book. Prieto exemplifies strength for me because he has this fear. He is struggling. He's a politician, and he is struggling with his sexuality in the book. And he's afraid that if he comes out, he'll be abandoned by his family, his constituents, etc. And so he has to face this fear of abandonment for his sexual identity. And Olga is exemplifying strength in, I guess, a more quiet way. At the beginning of the story, she doesn't really know who she is. Her identity is kind of reliant upon her job. She's this fantastic wedding coordinator. She's very popular and well-liked, and she's booking all these high-end weddings. But as the story progresses, she has to take steps into emotional vulnerability with this gentleman that she meets, Mateo, and in terms of finding strength to get over sexual trauma when she's violated, and strength in dealing with her toxic and manipulative mother. Her mother is a revolutionary in Puerto Rico, and she is more involved in politics than her children. And that's not necessarily the bad thing. I mean, it's great that she is fighting for what she feels is important in terms of Puerto Rican independence and everything, but it's at the expense of her children a lot. And Olga and Prieto both struggle with their relationship with their mother throughout this book, and they have to find the strength to let her go and to create healthy boundaries for themselves. I thought that this book was great in exemplifying all these different quiet, subtle methods of strength. Strength doesn't always mean feats of brawn, feats of endurance, or these big explosive moments where somebody makes this courageous, valiant effort. I think strength is like this most of the time, where people are just making quiet choices in their lives. So I thought this was a good one for that. Number 5 is the elbow, and somehow that is correlated to humor, I think, because that's where your funny bone is. I don't read a lot of humor, honestly. It's probably my least favorite genre. I know, even below romance. And then I guess it's not that I don't enjoy humor, because I love to laugh and I love it when I find books funny. I just rarely find books funny. I think that a lot of the books that are dubbed as humor for me fall flat. But one book that I actually did find quite funny is a romance, and that is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. It has so much snark and banter and wit and things for me that I really related to. I actually laughed at it several points throughout the book. I mean, not that the main romance arc is the funny part. It's more the banter between the two characters and their dynamics and the way that they communicate in these very sarcastic ways. I really related to that. I really love that. For me, this was probably the funniest book I've read this year. So we're gonna start moving a little bit lower in the body to the stomach, and the stomach is correlated with food in this instance. As a chef for a living, I could give you a list that would span hours on food, right? I could give you fictional books, non-fictional books, cookbooks, what have you. And I really struggled to pick just one book for this prompt. But I ultimately went with something that for me was foundational in my career as a chef, something that inspired me, something that taught me basics of cooking before I went to culinary school, and something that I continue to refer to as an adult, as a trained chef, as somebody that's worked in this industry for 20 years. And that is Mastering the Art of French Cooking by Julia Child, Louisette Berthold, and Simone Beck. This set of books, there's 2 in the series, is foundational for cooking, I feel. This is one of the best cookbooks I've ever read, in my opinion. It gives you techniques, basic techniques, all the way to very experienced techniques. It explains cooking terms, it explains different types of food techniques, it explains equipment. Like, it goes into so much detail. So someone that is a very, very beginner cook could read from this and find the references and the information that they need to effectively cook fairly complex and beautiful recipes. I got this book when I was about 15. I got actually both books. I think it was for Christmas. My grandmother got them for me. I then dedicated myself to going through and picking out recipes to cook. I didn't quite do this the way that I know that there was that lady that wrote the book about cooking every single recipe in this book. I didn't go quite that extreme, but I did go through and cook quite a few recipes. As you can see, I still actually even have some of my old bookmarks in here from the last batch of recipes that I did. This really inspired me further in terms of pursuing a career in the kitchen. So from the stomach, we're gonna drop down to the groin. And somehow Brandon has related the groin to romance. I think there's a step or 2 that's missing to get to the romance from the groin, but okay, we'll not think too hard into that. I picked a book that is not exactly romance. I mean, it is kind of romance, but like a dark, dysfunctional romance. And that is You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Akwa Eke Emeze. I read this book with my friend Allie a little while ago. We actually are working our way through Akwa Eke Emeze's backlist of books, and this was really interesting for me. It is promoted as a romance, and I would say like the first 50% of the book kind of feels like a romance. You have a character whose husband has died. She's 5 years post-death, and she is trying to figure out the dating thing. She's sleeping with people randomly, pursuing kind of risky behavior because she has this like emptiness within her, and she cannot figure out how to fill herself up. She then starts to date this guy who is taking it really slow for her. He recognizes that she's not really in the best place, and he's just, you know, like, we're gonna go at your speed, we're gonna do what you need to do to feel comfortable. And I really appreciated that. I was rooting for him very strongly. Then about halfway through this book, there is a dark twist. This book takes a turn in a direction I was not personally expecting. and I really had to grapple with it. So I won't go into too much detail for not wanting to spoil this book if you're interested in reading it. But I will say that this turn also goes in a romantic direction, but in a different romantic direction than you're anticipating. And it's kind of almost taboo, and it makes you feel really uncomfortable. It challenges your views of relationship, of love, of romance, and what is right for an individual. It made me question a lot of things about the relationships in this book. From the groin, we're jumping over to the hands, and the hands have been correlated with work. So because I work as a chef for a living, I figured I would pick another chef book. That's My Life in France by Julia Child. So this book is about Julia Child's experiences moving to France, learning to cook, getting involved with the women that she wrote Mastering the Art of French Cooking with, her husband's experiences in the CIA, and her experiences getting brought into not necessarily consult, but assist for little technical things for the CIA. It is a fantastic book if you're interested in Julia Child at all, and you should be. If you're like, why do I care about some old lady that used to cook? Want to talk about a really interesting person, a brilliant person, a funny person, somebody who in a time when women were supposed to be demure and staying at home and cleaning was just adventurous, who, you know, moved to another country, learned a new language, learned a new career, and then consulted for the CIA. Like, she's just such a remarkable woman, and reading her life story is fantastically interesting. So number 9 prompt is the legs, and the legs have been correlated with fitness. So for me, fitness is many, many different things. I like to do yoga, I go to the gym and lift weights, I'm a really avid hiker, I like to rock climb, I race motocross, I scuba dive. Like, I'm really into outdoorsy adventure stuff, and in particular, I like really high adrenaline type sports. So I picked up Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer. I know that Brandon in his original video did a Jon Krakauer book as well. He talked about Into the Wild, which is another really good book. But in this instance, I thought I would go a little bit bigger and go with the Everest summit and all the catastrophic things that happened on this particular summit. This book is a story of survival at high altitude, overcoming challenges, overcoming just monumental odds to survive, and it is fantastically written. I've personally hiked up to about 18,000 feet, and I thought I was gonna die at that point. So the fact that these people in this book make it up to 29,000 feet is remarkable to me. I have such a fascination with people that do these really, really high altitude climbs. And the final prompt is the foot. The foot was correlated with travel. So I feel like I couldn't do a prompt about travel without including a book by Anthony Bourdain. So I chose The Nasty Bits by Anthony Bourdain. I have all of his books, Kitchen Confidential, this one, World Traveler, Into the Weeds. Like, I really, really related to Anthony Bourdain, both because he was a chef and because of his views on travel and the way that he traveled. I feel a lot of similarities to him in those ways. And this book in particular, for me, was his best book on specifically travel. Like, Kitchen Confidential is more about the life of a chef, and World Traveler is more like outlines of trips. This really gets into little bits and pieces of the places he traveled, things that he felt were notable for one reason or another. And not all of them are pleasant. Some of the things he talks about in here are difficult, but it's a really fantastic book. And if you are a lover of travel, I would really suggest this one. This is, for me, I think one of the books that really inspired me to get out in the world. So you have, I think, two in this whole tag here, you have 2 people that were really foundational in my life. Julia Child for inspiring me to get into cooking, and Anthony Bourdain for inspiring me not just to travel, because I think I had a desire to travel before I knew who Bourdain was, but I think he inspired the way that I travel. So that's all 10 prompts. And if you're watching this, please consider yourself tagged. This tag is open to everyone, so I'm not gonna tag any specific people in this video. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button, comment down below, and let me know, is there a specific book that you correlate to any different body part? Like, tell me one of the prompts and what book you would put in that place. And if you're not already subscribed to this channel, please hit the subscribe button down below. That way you never miss a video, and we can chat again soon in the future.